The sun was sinking behind the crimson mesas when the riders appeared on the ridge, dark shapes against a sky burning itself out. The Apache camp, spread below in a wide crescent around the river, stirred as the first cries of warning echoed through the dust.
Children ran to their mothers.
Dogs barked and wove through the tents. The wind carried the scent of sage and horses and far-off thunder. It was the season of storms, and with it came change. At the front of the column rode Taza, the fire bear, a giant among warriors, broad as two men across the shoulders, his braids heavy with beads carved from mountain bone. The setting light made his skin glow copper and his eyes gleam like pieces of obsidian. Every motion of his horse seemed to shake the air with authority. Behind him rode hunters, their faces painted with red clay, their lances tipped with blackened steel. Between them rode two small figures, the twins. They were scarcely more than 16 summers, a boy and a girl born of the same cry. Naira, the sister, carried herself with a quiet tension, like a string drawn but unloosed. Siran, her brother, kept his head low, his jaw tight with the effort not to tremble. Both were bound at the wrists with leather cords, though no one had raised a weapon against them. There was no need. Fear itself was a tether. Their village had fallen 3 nights before, not to slaughter but to surrender. The Apache had surrounded it under the fire-lit sky and demanded tribute, grain, horses, and 2 youths untested by war. Taza had said, "Give us blood that has not yet known its purpose, and we will spare your hearths." No one had dared to refuse. The twins were chosen because they were orphans, children of a hunter and a healer lost to sickness years before. They had no one left to protest. Now, as the riders descended the slope toward the camp, the people gathered in silence to watch. Old women murmured prayers. Warriors measured the twins with eyes sharpened by memory of their own trials. Somewhere a drum began to beat. Slow, deliberate, like a heart counting down to revelation. When they reached the center of the encampment, Taza dismounted in one fluid motion. His shadow fell across the twins as he regarded them. "Step forward," he commanded, his voice deep as the canyon's breath. Naira lifted her chin. Though the dust clung to her skin and her wrists bore the mark of the cords, there was defiance in her gaze. Siran followed half a pace behind, glancing from her to the towering chief, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Taza studied them a long moment. "You are unbroken," he said finally. "Good. The spirits test only what has strength to survive." He turned to the watching circle of tribespeople. "These two come not as slaves, but as offerings to the night of fire. Under the moon that bleeds, they will face the ancient way. If they endure, they will rise as one with us." A murmur swept through the crowd, a mix of approval, awe, and fear. The night of the fire moon was more than ceremony. It was ordeal. Those who faced it were changed or consumed. The twins exchanged a glance, understanding little of what was said but feeling the weight of destiny pressing close. Naira's fingers brushed Siran's for an instant, the briefest touch of reassurance before Taza motioned to his aides. The warriors untied their cords and handed them each a small pouch made of deer hide. "For your courage," one of them said. Inside each pouch lay a single coal, still warm, the symbol of life carried through darkness. As twilight deepened, torches were lit around the camp, painting everything in gold and shadow. The twins were given food, roasted corn, water sweetened with berries, and a tent near the edge of the gathering. They ate little, listening to the murmurs outside. Drums pulsed now in rhythm with the wind, steady and ancient. From across the fire, they could see Taza seated alone on a great stone. His face was turned toward the horizon where the moon would rise. He seemed carved from the same earth that surrounded him, immovable, eternal. Yet in his stillness there was purpose, as if he too awaited a trial. When darkness finally swallowed the desert, Naira whispered to her brother, "We are not captives. Siran, we are being tested." He nodded, though fear still clung to him. "And if we fail?" She looked at the glowing coals in her palm. "Then the fire will remember our names." Outside, the drums quickened, calling all toward the sacred canyon. The night of their fate had begun. The moon had risen, swollen and red as blood, its light spilling across the desert like molten copper. Every rock, every tent, every face seemed painted with fire. The air was alive with drumming, slow at first, then building into a pulse that made the sand tremble beneath bare feet. Taza, the fire bear, stood at the heart of the circle. Around him, the tribe gathered in silence, forming a living ring of flickering shadows. The twins, Naira and Siran, were led into the open space between the fires. Neither spoke. The wind carried the low hum of the shaman's chant, a language older than their fear, older than the mountains themselves. Taza raised his arm, and the drumming ceased at once. The only sound left was the crackle of fire and the sigh of the night wind. "Children of another blood," he began, his deep voice rolling like distant thunder. "You stand on sacred ground. The fire moon watches all hearts tonight. It sees what we hide, and what we pretend to be. It burns away lies. It leaves only truth." He turned his gaze from one twin to the other. Naira met his eyes without flinching. Siran, though trembling, forced himself to stand tall beside her. Taza continued, "In our way there is no victory without trial, no belonging without fire. To walk among us you must pass through the night that breaks the weak and shapes the strong." He gestured to the shaman, old Tala, whose long braids swayed like roots in the wind. She stepped forward, carrying a bowl carved from obsidian, filled with red earth and smoldering sage. Smoke curled around her hands as she circled the twins, marking a line of ash on their foreheads. "The spirits will know you now," she murmured. "Your fear has a name. It will come for you before the dawn." The words chilled them more than the cold air. When Tala stepped back, Taza took a long breath and began to speak, not as a war chief, but as the guardian of ancient law. "Before the fire moon all are equal, hunter and hunted, master and child. Tonight you will face the three truths: the fear in your heart, the shadow in your blood, and the fire that waits to be born." He pointed toward the canyon that opened beyond the camp, a black wound in the earth, silent and endless. "You will enter there when the drums call. You will not take weapon or light. You will walk until you see what you most dread, and you will name it aloud. If your voice holds steady, the canyon will let you pass. If not, you will belong to its silence forever." A murmur rippled through the gathered people. Even the seasoned warriors bowed their heads. No one spoke during the command. Naira swallowed, her throat dry. "And if we survive?" she asked, her voice steady but small in the vastness of the night. Taza's expression did not change. "Then the fire will call you kin, and your blood will carry its strength." Siren's eyes darted toward the canyon's edge, a black line against the red light. He felt the weight of the night pressing on his chest. He thought of his sister's words. "We are being tested." Taza stepped closer. Though his size dwarfed them, his presence was not cruel, only immense, as if he bore the weight of countless nights just like this one. He lowered his head slightly, speaking so only the twins could hear. "You were not chosen for punishment," he said. "You were chosen because the spirit saw something sleeping inside you. Fire sleeps until it is called. Tonight you will call it." He straightened, raising his arms to the sky. "Let the fire moon bear witness," he thundered. The drums roared to life again, faster now, echoing across the desert. Warriors lifted torches, tracing circles of flame in the air. Women sang in low, rhythmic tones, invoking ancestors by name. The sound seemed to rise into the stars. Taza turned once more to the twins. "At moon's height you will walk," he said. "Until then, sit by the fire. Breathe the smoke. Let it show you what waits inside your heart." Tala returned, offering them each a carved cup filled with a dark, bitter drink, a mixture of herbs and ashes. Naira hesitated only a moment before drinking. Siran followed, grimacing at the taste. The shaman smiled faintly. "Now the fire will know you." Taza gave a final nod and turned away, disappearing into the shadows beyond the flame. The twins sat side by side as the chanting swelled. Their eyes grew heavy, the world shifting and shimmering around them. The moon seemed to pulse like a living thing. In the wavering heat they saw visions and of wolves circling the canyon, of figures made of smoke whispering their names. The ground itself seemed to breathe, and as the drums built to a fevered rhythm, a voice, deep and distant, echoed in their minds. "The night begins." The first light of dawn had long faded from memory. The desert night lay deep and endless, painted in shades of red and black beneath the swollen fire moon. Around the central flames, the tribe moved in measured rhythm, a tide of voices, smoke and song. The air itself seemed alive. Sage and pine resin burned in tall clay bowls, their smoke rising in spirals that caught the moonlight like ghostly ribbons. Drums throbbed in slow, steady heartbeats. Rattles hissed in counterpoint. Every sound spoke of the old ways, the time when humans and spirits shared the same wind. At the center of the gathering stood the twins, Naira and Siran, clothed now in woven deer hide dyed with ochre and ash. Their hands had been washed in river water mixed with crushed juniper. Old Tala, the shaman, stood before them, her wrinkled hand steady despite the years carved into her face. Her eyes reflected the fire as she began to speak. "The spirits have seen your fear," she intoned. "Now they must see your courage. The fire marks all who seek truth, and truth leaves its scar." From a small pot beside her, she took a handful of red clay mixed with oil. Slowly, reverently, she drew symbols upon the twins' skin. Across Naira's cheeks, Tala painted twin arcs like the crescent horns of a moon. Across Siran's chest, she drew a jagged line, the path of lightning. "These are not decorations," Tala whispered. "They are doors. When the canyon tests you, the marks will open. Through them, the fire will see your heart." Naira felt the clay cool against her skin, heavy and strange, as though the earth itself had laid a hand upon her. The smell of it, copper and smoke and something older, while it filled her lungs. She wanted to ask what the symbols meant, but the moment felt too sacred for questions. Behind her, the women of the tribe began to sing again, a slow, rising chant that spoke of rebirth. One voice would start low, then others joined until the sound became a living current flowing through the night. Taza approached through the smoke, his massive frame outlined in red light. He carried no weapon now, only a torch, which he thrust into the central fire until it blazed white. Turning to the twins, he raised the torch high. "In the time before time," he said, "the fire spirit gave our ancestors its breath. It burned away weakness and left only will. Each generation must remember that gift. Tonight you carry the fire, and through you it will learn if humankind still deserves it." He lowered the torch, touching its flame to 2 smaller branches, one for each twin. The wood caught quickly, flaring bright against the night. "Carry these into the canyon," he told them. "When fear comes, lift the fire. It will not protect your flesh, but it may keep your spirit awake." Naira took her torch carefully, feeling the heat pulse through the handle. Siran followed, his eyes wide, reflecting the flicker of the flames. Taza stepped back, and the people parted to open a path leading from the camp to the mouth of the canyon, a dark wound in the desert floor. The wind that came from it was cool and damp, carrying a scent of stone and rain. But before the twins could move, Tala raised her voice once more. "Not yet," she said. "The earth must also know them." She reached into a gourd filled with black dust, powdered charcoal and crushed herbs, and sprinkled it over their feet. "This is the dust of ancestors. Each grain is a voice. When you walk, they will walk with you. When you fall, they will remember." Naira felt the powder cling to her skin. For the first time, her fear softened. She thought of her mother, who had once told her that courage is not the absence of trembling, but the choice to move despite it. The drumming quickened, echoing like thunder over stone. Warriors began to strike their spears against the earth in rhythm, and women cast handfuls of petals into the fire. Sparks rose like stars trying to return to the heavens. Taza raised both arms. "Let the fire moon bear witness," he shouted. "The marks are made, the spirits awake. When the next drum falls silent, they walk the canyon of truth." The people cried out in one voice, not in triumph, but in reverence. The sound rolled across the desert, blending with the howl of a distant coyote. Tala turned to the twins and laid a hand on each of their heads. "Go without pride, go without fear," she murmured. "Only the humble heart finds the path back." Then she drew back and the circle widened. The twins stood alone now, 2 small flames in the sea of darkness. Above them, the fire moon glowed larger than before, as though the sky itself were holding its breath. When the drums struck their final beat, the echoes seemed to pull them forward. The canyon waited, silent, endless, alive, and with torches burning in their hands and sacred clay cooling on their skin. The twins stepped into the mouth of the earth. The canyon opened before them like the mouth of a sleeping god. From the edge, the ground sloped sharply downward into shadows so deep they seemed alive. The air was colder here, the heat of the campfire replaced by a breath of stone and time. The torches sputtered and hissed as if uneasy in the presence of such darkness. Naira stood still at the threshold, her heart beating in rhythm with the distant drums that echoed faintly behind them. Siran's torchlight trembled across the jagged walls, revealing shapes that looked like faces, old carvings or tricks of the light. She could not tell. Behind them, the chants of the tribe grew distant, fading into the wind until only the whisper of the desert remained. Then, as if the entire world had drawn one long breath, the fire moon broke free from the clouds. It rose vast and red over the ridge, painting the canyon in liquid copper. Every surface glowed. The stones looked wet, as though blood itself had soaked through them. The twins turned to look. Taza and the tribe were no longer visible, only a circle of fire far behind, small as a fallen star. "The fire moon watches," Naira whispered, repeating the shaman's words. "It sees all hearts," Siran nodded, gripping his torch tighter. "Then it sees mine shaking." She smiled faintly. "Then it knows you're alive." They stepped forward together. The first few paces were easy, the path wide and firm beneath their feet. The torches threw long shadows that slid over the canyon walls like restless spirits. But as they descended, the ground narrowed and the wind grew stronger, curling between the cliffs like a voice trying to form words. It carried with it faint echoes, drums, laughter, screams. None were real. The canyon was ancient, carved not only by time but by memory. Every sound was a story it refused to forget. At a bend in the path, Naira paused. There was movement ahead, a flicker of light not from their torches. "Do you see that?" she asked. Siran raised his torch. The glow illuminated a small opening in the rock. Within it, symbols were etched deep into the stone, filled with some pale, glimmering substance that caught the moonlight. They looked like the markings Tala had painted on their skin, crescent-shaped zigzags, spirals. "She said these are doors," Naira murmured. "Maybe this is one." Siran touched the carved lightning on his chest where the clay had begun to dry and crack. "Doors to what?" "Truth," she said simply. He almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. The air around the symbols pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Then for a moment everything went still. The wind, the torches, even the sound of their breathing. The canyon seemed to listen, and then came the whisper. At first it was soft, almost gentle, a woman's voice, speaking in a language neither of them knew. Then it deepened, layered, multiplied, until the air itself seemed full of murmuring. The ground shivered beneath their feet. Siran took a step back. "We shouldn't be here," he said. Naira didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing wall. "No," she whispered. "This is where we're meant to be." She reached out and pressed her hand against one of the carvings. The light flared beneath her palm, spreading like liquid fire across the stone. The canyon walls trembled, and from deep within the earth came a sound like a sigh, or a roar. Siran shouted her name, but before he could reach her, the glow vanished. Everything fell silent again. The torchlight flickered uncertainly, revealing only ordinary rock once more. Naira turned, her face pale but calm. "It showed me something," she said. "What did you see?" "Not yet," she replied. "It wasn't for you." He wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. It was not defiance or pride, it was awe. Whatever she had seen had changed her. They continued on, the canyon twisting deeper. Overhead, the fire moon reached its peak, so large now it filled the sky. The air shimmered faintly, and their shadows stretched long and distorted across the ground. As they walked, the markings on their skin began to glow faintly, the clay shimmering with the same red light as the moon. It pulsed in rhythm with their hearts. Siran looked down at his chest, alarmed. "Naira, I know," she said. "The fire knows us now." Ahead, the canyon widened into a vast basin where ancient stones formed a perfect circle. In the center, a black pool reflected the moon like an unbroken mirror. "This is where the trial begins," Naira whispered. The drums were gone. The wind had died. Only the slow, steady beat of their hearts filled the silence. Above them, the fire moon hung motionless, vast and terrible and divine. And somewhere beyond sight, the voice of Taza carried faintly on the wind. "Face what hides in your hearts." The stillness was heavy enough to breathe. The air in the basin seemed thicker than water, pressing against their chests as though the canyon itself were waiting. The black pool before them glimmered faintly in the light of the fire moon, a mirror of molten shadow. Naira and Siran stood side by side, their torches guttering low. The silence had weight. It pressed on their minds until thoughts themselves felt loud. Then, as if some unseen hand had drawn a breath across the earth, the flames on their torches flickered and went out. The darkness was absolute. Siran cursed softly, the sound small in the vastness. "Naira, I'm here." Her voice came from somewhere close, though the air seemed to swallow it. He reached out blindly, fingers groping for hers, but found only emptiness. The next sound he heard was not her answer, but the ripple of water. Then came the voice. Not loud, not shouted, just near. Too near. "Siran." He froze. The voice was his father's. A voice he hadn't heard since he was a child, before the sickness took him. "Siren," it said again, gentle, familiar. "You left me to die." He shook his head violently. "No, that's not true." But the darkness rippled, and from it stepped a shape. The firelight that wasn't there still managed to find it. A man, broad-shouldered and stern, his eyes pale as smoke. He was not quite solid, as if made of mist and memory. Siran stumbled backward. "You're not real." The figure smiled sadly. "Does it matter? The guilt is real enough." The canyon filled with whispering echoes of that single word. Guilt, 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 until he clamped his hands over his ears. The sound came from inside his skull now. Louder, faster. He fell to his knees, shaking. "I was a child," he said. "I couldn't help you." The shadow of his father stepped closer. "You could have tried." Siren squeezed his eyes shut. Heart pounding. He remembered the fever, the smell of smoke from the burning huts, the fear that had rooted him in place while his father coughed himself into silence. He had been 10. He had run instead of staying. "I was afraid," he whispered. "I was afraid." The word hung in the air. The whisper stopped. The shadow paused, tilting its head, as if listening to something unseen. Then, slowly, it began to dissolve. The darkness softened, and a faint warmth spread through the air. The pool before him shimmered again, reflecting not the fire moon but a single flame. Small, golden, steady. Siran realized his torch had reignited in his hand. He didn't remember lighting it. He exhaled, trembling, and whispered into the air, "I named my fear." Elsewhere, Naira was running. The canyon had changed around her, the path narrowing into a corridor of towering rock. The air was heavy and sweet with the scent of wildflowers, though no plants grew here. Her footsteps echoed strangely, as if she were walking on hollow ground. Then she heard laughter. It was her own. From the shadows ahead stepped another Naira, identical, except her eyes gleamed with a cruel light. "You think you're brave," the reflection said. "But bravery is just pride wearing a prettier face." Naira lifted her torch. The other didn't cast a shadow. "You speak like a spirit," Naira said. "I am the spirit you deny." The reflection replied, circling her. "The part of you that wants to lead, to command, to take the fire for yourself. You call it courage, but it is hunger. I'm not like you." "Oh?" The double smiled. "Then why didn't you stop the warriors when they came for you? You could have fought. You could have died with your people. But you wanted to live. You wanted to see what came next. You enjoyed surviving." Naira's breath caught. Say it," the shadow urged. "Say it, and I will let you pass." She closed her eyes. The memory came unbidden. Her neighbors kneeling, her own hand clutching Siran's wrist as they were led away. A tiny spark of something had lived inside her then, not hope, but curiosity. The shame of that moment had haunted her ever since. "I wanted to live," she whispered, "even if it meant leaving them." The canyon groaned, a low rumble like distant thunder. The reflection smiled, fading into mist. "And that," it said, "is the truth." Naira opened her eyes. The walls of the canyon shimmered, the darkness retreating. Her torch flared back to life. When she found Siran again at the basin's edge, his eyes were red from tears, but his hands were steady. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "You too?" he asked. She nodded. "The canyon showed me what I am, and I'm not proud of it," she said softly, "but I think it's part of me." He looked at the pool again. The surface was still as glass, reflecting both their faces and the fire moon above. Then, from somewhere high above the cliffs came Taza's voice, carried by the wind, deep and unyielding. Only those who face their fear may find their fire. And as the last echo faded, the pool began to glow. The glow of the pool deepened until it filled the basin with red light. The surface rippled, though no wind stirred it. The sound was soft, almost like breathing. The canyon itself seemed alive, exhaling through the stone. Naira and Siran stood side by side at the edge of the water, torches flickering weakly against the brightness. The clay markings on their skin were no longer dull. They shimmered faintly, alive with threads of molten red that pulsed with their heartbeats. They had both seen something private, something they would never quite be able to explain. But now that they stood together again, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Siran broke the silence first. "I saw Father." Naira turned to him. "Was he angry?" "No," Siran said. "Only disappointed, and that was worse. But when I spoke the truth, he was gone." Naira's gaze fell to the glowing water. "The canyon doesn't want apologies. It wants honesty." He studied her face. "What did you see?" She hesitated. The words tasted like iron. "Myself. But not the self I show the world. The one that wanted to live, no matter what it cost." Siran nodded slowly. "The canyon doesn't show lies." The wind stirred then, faint but rising. The surface of the pool quivered, and the reflection of the fire moon began to twist and distort, stretching into the shape of a great eye. The twins drew closer to one another instinctively. A deep hum rolled through the stone. Dust fell from the canyon walls like falling stars. The light from the moon reflected off the water and poured outward, wrapping around them like smoke. Then, from the cliffs above, came a drum beat. Just one, low and long, like thunder that refused to end. Siran lifted his head. "They're still watching us." "Yes," Naira said. "Taza is watching." Far above on the ridge that overlooked the canyon, the fire bear stood in silence. His tribe gathered behind him, torches burning against the night. He said nothing, his gaze locked on the two small figures below. Old Tala stood beside him, her voice a rasp of wind. "They have spoken their fears. The canyon knows them now." Taza's jaw tightened. The fire has not yet judged. He raised one hand, and the drummers behind him struck their skins in unison, 3 beats, sharp and final. In the basin, the water exploded upward. Naira and Siran staggered back as the pool erupted into flame, burning without smoke or ash. The fire rose high enough to lick the canyon walls, but it did not consume. It hovered, spiraling, its heart a deep gold. Siran shielded his face. "What is happening?" "The judgment," Naira whispered. The flames bent toward them, drawn as if by unseen wind. When they touched the twins' clay markings, the fire sank into their skin, hot, bright, yet painless. The symbols blazed briefly, then dimmed, leaving faint golden scars that glowed softly under the moonlight. And then the fire fell silent, collapsing back into the pool, which closed again like a healed wound. The silence that followed was enormous. From the cliffs, Taza lowered his hand. "They live," he said quietly. Old Tala nodded. "Then they are chosen." Taza's eyes never left the twins. The fire sleeps no longer. Below, Naira and Siran knelt beside the pool, breathing hard. Neither spoke for a long while. Then Naira dipped her hand into the cooling water. It no longer reflected the moon. It reflected only her face. And beside it, Siran's. "Do you feel it?" she asked. He nodded. "Something inside me. Burning. But it doesn't hurt." She looked up at the ridge. She couldn't see Taza, but she felt his gaze on them like the weight of the sun. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's only the first door." Siran stood, gripping his torch again. "Then we walk through the next one together." Above them, the fire moon began to sink toward the western ridge, bleeding its light over the canyon's rim. The drums resumed, not the rhythm of challenge now, but of return. The twins began the long climb upward, their shadows stretching long behind them. Around them, the walls of the canyon glowed faintly, alive with veins of red that pulsed like a great heart. When they reached the rim, dawn had begun to touch the horizon with silver. The fires of the tribe burned low, and Taza stood waiting, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked at them for a long time, saying nothing. The twins waited, still breathing the scent of smoke and earth. Finally, he spoke. "The fire moon saw your fear," he said. "It saw your truth. You did not flee. You did not lie. The fire accepts you." He stepped forward and placed a massive hand on each of their shoulders. "You entered the canyon as children. You return as warriors." Naira met his gaze. "Then what comes next?" Taza looked toward the fading moon. "Now," he said, "you learn what it means to share its fire." The first light of dawn broke like the slow opening of an ancient eye. Pale gold crept over the desert, washing away the red of the fire moon and replacing it with the calm of morning. But the fire at the heart of the Apache camp still burned bright, taller, stronger than any flame of ordinary wood. It was the heart fire, the oldest blaze of the tribe kept alive through generations. Around it, the people gathered once more. The drums were silent now, replaced by the soft murmur of wind and the crackle of flame. Taza stood before the great fire, his massive frame wrapped in a cloak of black bear hide. His expression was unreadable, yet in his eyes lived the reflection of pride, quiet and solemn, not boastful. When Naira and Siran emerged from the canyon, the tribe parted to let them pass. No one spoke, but every gaze that followed them carried reverence. Their bodies bore the faint gold scars of the fire's touch, glowing like embers against their skin. The marks on their faces and chests shimmered faintly even in the daylight. Old Tala greeted them first. Her voice was rough but gentle, like wind moving through old reeds. "You have walked the canyon and returned with its truth." "Few do," Siran bowed his head. "The canyon showed us fear. And you named it," Tala said. "That is all courage ever asks." She motioned for them to step closer to the fire. Taza turned toward them then, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every ear in the camp. "Last night the fire moon looked upon you," he said. "It saw the shadows in your hearts and did not turn away. It found you worthy." He lifted a long staff carved with spirals and feathers, pressing its end into the fire until it blazed white. "Now the fire must know you as kin." The twins exchanged a glance, not of fear, but of calm acceptance. Together they stepped forward until the heat from the flames wrapped around them like a living breath. Taza lowered the staff between them. "Each flame is both life and hunger," he said. "It destroys what is false and guards what is true. To carry the fire is to carry both mercy and wrath. Will you bear it?" Naira spoke first. "I will," Siran's voice followed. "We will." Taza nodded once. Then dipping his hand into the fire, impossibly unburned, he drew 2 small coals from the heart of the blaze. He held them before the twins, their heat radiating against the cool morning air. "Take these," he said, "not as servants, not as captives, as guardians of the flame." Naira cupped her hands and received 1 ember. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat, and she felt warmth spread through her chest. Siran took the other, and his breath caught. The coal glowed without pain, the light seeping into his palms, sinking beneath the skin. When the coals vanished, replaced by faint golden sparks that danced across their fingers, the people began to murmur, low and reverent. Taza stepped back, lifting his staff again. "Let all here bear witness. The fire has been shared." A roar of approval rose from the tribe. Drums resumed, slow and deep, while dancers moved in wide circles around the heart fire. Children threw handfuls of herbs into the flames, which burst into colors, green, blue, gold. Old Tala handed each twin a ceremonial necklace made from obsidian and bone. "These are the mirrors of the soul," she told them. "When you lose your way, look into the stone. It will show not who you are, but what you've become." As the ceremony continued, Naira watched Taza closely. Beneath his strength there was something she hadn't seen before, weariness perhaps, or a kind of sorrow. When their eyes met, he spoke softly, meant only for her and Siren. The fire moon does not rise every year, he said. Its trials come when the tribe's heart begins to dim. You were brought to us not by conquest, but by need. You carry the fire now, and through you we remember what we are. Siren frowned slightly. Then the trial was not just for us? Taza shook his head. No trial ever is. When one heart is tested, the tribe learns its reflection. He turned toward the fire once more, lifting his arms. The night is over, he proclaimed. The dawn belongs to the children of flame. A cheer rolled through the camp, echoing against the cliffs. The air filled with the scent of sage and cedar, the song of drums swelling again, no longer heavy, but joyous. Naira looked at her brother. The light of the fire reflected in his eyes, steady and alive. We survived, she said. He smiled faintly. No, he replied. We were reborn. Above them, the last trace of the fire moon faded into the daylight sky, leaving behind only a thin line of red on the horizon, like the closing of a wound, or the promise of something yet to come. That night, the fire burned low, but its embers refused to die. The tribe slept in quiet peace beneath the canopy of stars. Their laughter from the celebration long faded into silence. Only the soft breathing of horses and the crackle of dying wood broke the stillness. Naira and Siren sat beside the glowing remains of the heart fire. They had been unable to sleep. Something in the air trembled, an unseen pulse, faint but steady, as though the desert itself still remembered the trial. The flames won't rest, Naira murmured. Tracing her finger through the ashes, Siren stared at the faint gold marks on his arms. They shimmered softly in the firelight, just as hers did. Maybe they can't, he said. Maybe the fire's inside us now. The wind shifted, carrying with it a strange, sweet scent, something between cedar and rain. The air grew warm, and the stars above began to blur, their light bending and warping like heat rising from the sand. Naira blinked. Do you see that? Saran didn't answer. His eyes were already fixed on the fire. The embers were glowing brighter, each one pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Then the world tilted, or perhaps it folded, and the desert vanished. They stood not in the camp, but in a vast, endless plain of red sand beneath a black sky. No stars, no moon, only the faint glow of fire drifting through the air like dust. Are we dreaming? Siren whispered. Naira shook her head slowly. No, this is the fire's memory. Before them rose a figure, enormous, shifting and made of flame. It was neither man nor woman, but both. Its shape rippled like molten glass, and its voice, when it spoke, filled the air like thunder rolling through stone. Children of the moonfire, the voice said, you have passed the test of fear. Now you must learn the weight of fire. The twins knelt instinctively. The heat was immense, yet it did not burn. It felt instead like being seen. Every thought, every scar, every hidden truth laid bare. Long before your birth, said the flame, we gave the first Apache the gift of the ember. It was not meant to destroy, but to remind. Every generation must bear it, or the tribe forgets what it means to endure. Siran lifted his head. Why us? The flame bent closer, its form flickering with the echoes of faces. Ancient warriors, mothers, children, all woven from light. Because you are of two souls in one spirit, it said. Twin hearts born to mirror the balance between destruction and creation. One cannot live without the other. The fire's shape rippled again. Within it they saw the canyon, the trial, the tribe, and beyond that a glimpse of what was yet to come. Smoke rising over the plains, foreign riders, shadows crossing the mountains. Naira's chest tightened. The tribe, they'll be attacked. Every flame faces wind, said the fire. It is not your task to stop the storm, but to carry the spark through it. The ember must never die. The words burned into them like brands. The fire began to fade, its light shrinking until only a single golden coal remained, floating between them. When the fire moon rises again, the voice whispered, you will lead the tribe. The old bear's time will end, and the dawn will seek your hands. The coal split in two, one ember sinking into Naira's chest, the other into Siran's. The world shattered into sparks. They woke with a start. The camp was still dark, but dawn pressed faintly at the horizon. The fire was no longer low, and it had reignited on its own, its flames steady and bright. Naira pressed a hand to her chest. The skin above her heart glowed faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Siren's did the same. He looked at her, his eyes wide. "Did you hear it too?" "Yes," she whispered. "And we saw what's coming." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the flames dance. The night no longer felt empty. It felt full, heavy with the breath of the spirits. In the distance, they heard Taza's deep voice calling the morning watch. Soon, the tribe would wake. Soon, the world would demand action. But for now, the twins simply watched the fire, the wind stirring their hair, the embers glowing like stars reborn. "The fire lives," Naira said softly. Siren nodded. "And it remembers us." The sun rose like a blade drawn slow and deliberate across the horizon. Its first light spilled over the camp, catching on weapons, hides, and sleeping faces. The cool stillness of dawn trembled with the weight of things unspoken, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Naira and Siran stood by the heart fire, which still burned despite the night's passing. The flames seemed calmer now, less wild, but every so often they'd flare sharply as though stirred by something unseen. They hadn't slept since the vision. Neither had spoken much. Words felt too small to hold what they had witnessed, but they knew they couldn't keep it to themselves. Taza appeared at the edge of the camp, already awake, as though the fire had summoned him. His heavy steps crushed the sand, and the rising light threw long shadows behind him. Even in the morning calm, he looked like a storm given human shape, vast, solemn, eternal. He stopped before them. "You did not rest," he said, his tone more observation than question. "No," Naira replied quietly. "The fire showed us things." Taza's eyes narrowed. "Then speak." They told him everything, of the desert of red sand and the figure made of flame, of the voices, countless and ancient, whispering from within the light, of the prophecy and of the darkness that would soon fall upon the tribe. When they finished, silence hung between them, taut and electric. Taza did not move. The wind stirred his hair, streaked now with gray. His eyes, once burning with certainty, seemed distant, not from disbelief but from recognition. Old Tala had approached during the telling, drawn by instinct. She stood beside him, clutching her staff. Her expression was grim but knowing. "The fire moon does not lie," she said. "The spirits speak only when they must." Taza's gaze remained on the twins. "You saw war," Siran nodded. "Smoke and riders. Men who do not belong to these lands and the north." Taza murmured. "The White Riders." His jaw tightened. "We've heard of them. Settlers and soldiers moving across the plains. They take what they want. They burn what they cannot hold." Naira met his eyes. "The vision said we cannot stop the storm. Only carry the fire through it." Taza looked down at her. A man carved from battle, staring at something he could neither strike nor command. "To carry fire through wind," he said quietly. "That is a task for more than warriors. That is a task for leaders." Old Tala placed a hand on his arm. "You hear what the spirits mean, old bear?" He frowned. "Their tongues are never simple." "They never are," she agreed. "But they said the fire moon's dawn would seek their hands. The meaning is plain enough." Taza turned to the heart fire. Its flames bent toward the twins as though pulled by their breath. He watched in silence, and in that silence he felt something shift. The same warmth that once filled him when he was chosen by the old chieftain decades ago now passed through him like a memory fading into the wind. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "The fire has chosen its new keepers." The words struck Naira like thunder. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Taza said, "that my time is closing. The fire moon has no need of me now. I was its bearer once. But you—" He nodded to both of them. "You are its future." Siren's throat tightened. "We are not ready to lead." "No one ever is," Taza said. "When I was chosen, I was younger than you are now." "The spirits do not wait for readiness. They demand becoming." Old Tala smiled faintly. "The embers do not ask the flame if it is ready to burn." Taza drew a long breath. Then, without ceremony, he took from his belt a piece of flint shaped like a crescent moon, blackened by years of use. "This was given to me when I swore to guard the fire," he said. "Now I pass it to you both." He placed the stone in Naira's hands. It was warm, almost alive. The carved edges shimmered faintly as though catching unseen light. "The tribe must know," Naira whispered. "They'll be afraid." "They will look to you," Taza said. "Fear is the beginning of faith. Lead them through it." He turned away then, his broad shoulders catching the sunlight. The wind tugged at his cloak, and for the first time Naira noticed how heavy his steps seemed. Not from pride, but from years carried too long. Siran called after him, "What will you do?" Taza stopped but did not turn. "Prepare for the storm," he said, "and teach you what only battle can." Then he walked toward the cliffs, where the sun was still climbing, an old guardian fading into the light, making way for the dawn he had helped to summon. The wind came first, hot, restless, full of dust and the scent of thunder. It swept across the plains, flattening grass and rattling the hides of the Apache lodges. Birds fled to the cliffs, and even the horses grew uneasy, stamping the ground as if feeling something greater than weather. By noon, the watchers on the ridge saw smoke. Not the kind that rose from campfires. This smoke was thicker, darker, rising in plumes from the north. Taza stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind tugging at his hair, his eyes like storm clouds. Behind him, the tribe was gathering, moving quickly but not in panic. The fire bear had prepared them well. Naira and Siran approached, both now wearing the obsidian necklaces given to them after the fire moon ceremony. The gold scars on their skin glowed faintly under the daylight, marks of the sacred flame. "They're close," Siran said. "Yes," Taza replied. "Riders wind at least 30, soldiers, I can smell their iron." Naira clenched her jaw. The vision was true. "It always is," Taza said quietly. He turned then, looking at the camp. "Gather the people by the canyon. We will not fight them in the open. The fire will not die today." By dusk the storm reached them. The riders came like thunder, rifles gleaming, banners snapping in the wind. They shouted words the tribe did not understand. But the intent was clear in the smoke of their torches. The Apache did not run. Under the canyon's shadow, the tribe formed a half circle around the heart fire, which Taza had ordered moved to the center of the defense. It burned brighter than ever before, its flames defying the storm's wind, its heat pushing back the creeping fear. Taza stood at the front, spear in hand, his figure unshakable. Naira and Siran stood behind him, the air around them shimmering faintly with heat. The fire within them, the same one given by the spirits, pulsed stronger than their fear. "Do you remember the promise?" Taza asked without turning. "Yes," Siran said, "to carry the fire through the storm. Then you know what must be done." He faced them now, his eyes fierce and proud. "When I fall, you lead. You guard the ember. You keep it burning, even if the world turns to ash." Naira's throat tightened. "You won't fall." Taza smiled faintly, not in denial but in peace. Every fire feeds the next. The battle broke like a wave. Gunfire shattered the air. Arrows whistled back in answer. The canyon echoed with war cries and thunder. Smoke and dust turned the world red and gold. Taza fought like something beyond mortal. Every strike of his spear another heartbeat of the earth itself. But there were too many. The riders pushed forward, their weapons roaring. Then came the moment Naira had feared. A single shot, a cry, and the great warrior staggered. The fire bear fell to one knee. Siran caught him before he hit the ground. "Taza!" The old warrior gripped Siran's wrist, blood staining the gold marks on his arm. His voice was a rasp. "The fire. Take it." Naira knelt beside him, tears cutting lines through the dust on her face. "Don't," he smiled weakly. "The fire never dies." Then his hand went still. Something broke open in the world. The heart fire surged upward, roaring into the sky like a living thing. Flames leapt from the pit, swirling into the shape of the fire moon itself, a colossal red disk that hung above the canyon. The soldiers froze, their torches flickering uselessly. Naira rose, her eyes burning gold. "You will not take this land," she said. "It breathes with the souls of those who came before it, and they are not finished." The ground trembled. Wind and flame swept through the canyon, blinding the invaders. Horses screamed and bolted. The men fled, dropping their weapons into the dust. When the storm finally broke, only silence remained. Smoke drifted away into the cooling sky. Siran stood beside Naira, staring at the fading firelight. "He's gone," he whispered. Naira shook her head slowly. "No, he's here." She looked toward the heart fire, smaller now but still alive, glowing softly in the dark. Its warmth wrapped around them like a heartbeat. "We carried the fire through the storm," she said. Siran placed his hand on her shoulder, "and now we keep it burning." Years later, When the fire moon rose again,
The elders told stories around the same heart fire, stories of the night of the fire moon,
of the twins who bore the ember through war and loss, and of the giant who gave his life so the flame would live on. They said that on some nights, when the wind was right, the fire would roar and twist into the shape of a great bear, standing guard still, forever watching his children of flame, and under that sacred light, the tribe endured, for the fire, once shared, never dies.